Rain of Troy Hotline.
Alicia, Michael, what's going on?
We know you have takes. We have takes.
I'm actually surprised that your Rant Line, Rave Line, whatever, isn't completely full.
Why can't we just win a game?
Can I blame Michael Castillo for this?
Can I blame Bob Connolly for this?
Could I put on a zebra shirt and just go out there?
Scratch, claw, up against the wall.
Can't explain it what I'm feeling right now, guys.
I can't believe it.
Let's open up that race line! Woohoo!
Oh, I can't believe USC is 7-5 again. Oh no!
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rant Line Radio, episode 558, coming to you on Monday, September 16th. We're going to look back at the bye week and look ahead to USC and Michigan coming up on Saturday at 12:30 p.m. on CBS. We're going to preview our preview. This is going to be a pre-preview. We lied. We said we're going to do the game preview today. We're actually going to do it Wednesday. Like normal, and this is just a preview, if you will. I'm your host, Mike Castillo, joined along with my co-host in the Radio Studio in Los Angeles, Alicia Derritola.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, pre-preview. Does that work?
Yeah.
Does it feel cool?
It's like the night before the night before.
This is true. The day before the day before.
The penultimate. What is there's a word for
the pre-penultimate?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The night before the night before. It's the preview before the preview.
Yeah. Well, it's like Festivus, which is famously Christmas Eve, December 23rd.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyways, welcome back to the show. As always, you can email us, reignoftroy@fanside.com. Phone number 818-643-7227. Suck at What's Burn Show. I already did the intros. I don't know why I'm doing that, but we're doing it. It's a bye week. We're rusty.
Yeah.
We're rusty.
Gotta shake the rust off.
It's been a week. We'll see if SC can shake the rust off on Saturday when the Trojans play Michigan. But before we do that, Alicia, I think we got to hop into the news just straight away. You ready?
Ready.
All right, start with the AP poll, the Associated Press poll for week 4. The Trojans stay put at number 11. But Texas up to number 1 over Georgia. Georgia drops down to number 2 after a very squeaky win in Lexington over the Kentucky Wildcats. Ohio State 3, Alabama 4, Ole Miss 5, Tennessee 6, Missouri 7. That means 6 of the top 7 are out of the SEC. It just means more, of course. Miami up to 8, Oregon 9 after their big win in the Civil War over Oregon State. And Penn State is at 10, just ahead of the Trojans. Other teams of note, LSU 16, Notre Dame 17, Michigan 18, and Nebraska, SC's opponent in the middle of November, is at number 22. Should be 15. I think Nebraska should be 15 just so they can really just go all in with the Dylan Raiola Mahomes thing, right? Like, just put them at 15.
Hey, maybe. Dylan Raiola doesn't want to admit the Patrick Mahomes thing, though. So,
yeah.
Maybe it's a little too obvious.
My favorite comments on every TikTok video about Dylan Raiola is like, dude, just do the Kermit voice. Just do the Kermit voice, and if you've gone this far,
own it. That's all I'm saying. Like, don't act like, oh no, I'm not copying him. Like, no, own it. Say, yeah, I'm doing a Patrick Mahomes cosplay. What about it?
Yeah.
I'm that good. Like, own it.
Yeah, you should do it. Kenny in the chat mentions that 2004 SC remains the last team to go wire to wire, ranked number 1. A little bit more on that a little bit later. So a little teaser for later in the show. But the AP poll, I know people are sort of, people do the thing about the AP poll. SC stays put or whatever, and Miami jumps up, and who cares? It's week 3. Like, week 3 just ended. We're going into week 4. Like, all of SC's big games are still like SC still has to play Penn State and Notre Dame and Michigan and Nebraska. If they win all those games, they're going to be ranked super high. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What are we doing?
Especially in the era of the College Football Playoff Committee, we have seen the committee come in with their first rankings and completely not follow what the AP or the coaches poll was doing.
Yeah.
So again, it's not a big deal. There's very little data for anybody to do ranking with.
Mm-hmm.
Teams like Tennessee and Ole Miss, like they look really damn good. We haven't seen them against anybody good.
Yeah.
I think moving Texas up over Georgia is a little bit silly in my view because Georgia has a really strong win over Clemson. And yes, they had a tough out against Kentucky, but they won that game and showed some grit there.
Sure.
Texas, yes, they beat Michigan, but beating Michigan is less impressive to me, what we know about this Michigan team so far, than beating Clemson. So
is it?
Clemson is a team that will probably be 10-2. However bad they look every week, they're probably going to be 10-2 because Clemson's Clemson. It's just, they've become the Penn State of the ACC. So I don't know.
Is that more about them? Does that say more about them or more about the ACC?
Well, I mean, the ACC isn't a great conference this year.
I'm just saying, like, Texas or Georgia, like either one of them deserves to be number one. I don't care.
That's the thing is A, it doesn't matter. And
No.
B, there's overreactions to like when you play the good team, because if Georgia had struggled in week 1 and then beat Clemson this Saturday, Georgia would be number 1. Like,
yeah.
So it's just a whole, whatever. All of these things will shake out in the end. What really matters is if you win your conference, you're in the playoff. And if you don't win your conference, then let the committee figure out how to shuffle these together. So
yeah. We'll see how that all comes to be.
The bigger thing for me is that Nebraska getting up into that ranking is setting up what I've felt for a little while now, that Nebraska USC game is going to be a much bigger deal than it looked initially on that schedule. So looking forward to that.
We talked about it in the season predictions episode. You look at Nebraska's schedule, they really can start off like 7-0.
Yeah.
Like Illinois at home, I think they can beat Illinois. At Purdue, they can win that game versus Rutgers at home. Yeah. At Indiana, I think Indiana looked pretty good against UCLA, and that they're well coached with the old JMU coach, but it's not improbable that Nebraska can win that game, and then they're undefeated going into Columbus. So I don't know. We'll see. Lots of stuff. It's only week 4. Still a lot of stuff to go. Kenny in the chat mentions that the Nebraska game is officially a sellout, which is awesome. I saw a lot of things, people talking about Nebraska fans buying tickets for that. Of course, Husker home game
famously travel well.
Yeah, Husker home game is a thing. Like, it's a saying. It's what they do. And one of the best fan bases in the country, bar none. Absolutely.
I would call them the best fan base in the country, because I do not think very many fan bases would continue selling out their stadium, having watched Nebraska be Nebraska over the last couple decades.
Yeah, I think it does help. This is not a low blow, but I think it does help that in Nebraska, like literally nothing compares to Nebraska football.
Yeah.
It's like Nebraska football and the Tyson Chicken Factory, and those are the two big things. And the Creighton basketball.
Hey, they're big in volleyball too.
Yeah, so. That's true. Yeah, absolutely. All right, SC in Wisconsin coming up next week. SC's home debut in the Big Ten. Trojans and Beavers, Badgers. Similar animal, but
B.
Yeah, similar one. Trojans and Badgers will be playing Saturday the 28th of later this month. It's getting a 6-day timing window, the dreaded 6-day timing window. This is one of those things that was like implemented 10 years ago or so. And it was always in November because there's only so many of those. Here we go. We're getting one in September. The first option, the first time that there's a draft, which is week 4. Here we go. the Trojans are in, and 6-day timing window. It's either going to be 12:30, 4, or 4:30. At least it's a sort of narrow window there. It's not going to be the 9 a.m. Big Noon kickoff, and there's not going to be a 7:30
Late
Big
kick.
10 after dark, as weird as that is to say. So at least we know it'll be midday or prime time.
Yeah, and either way, I think those are times that generally USC fans do the least amount of complaining over.
Yeah.
So that sounds good to me. I personally will be rooting for the 4:30, 4 o'clock, one of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, I like those as well. Quick recruiting updates. Trojans get a 4-star linebacker, Ty Jackson, out of Loxahatchee, Florida. Committed to the Trojans back a week ago. 6'1", 200, number 95 in the 24/7 Sports Composite. He had offers from Bama, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Penn State. Ultimately picks the Trojans. Also, 4-star defensive lineman Vilami Mawala out of Salt Lake City. Committed to the Trojans earlier this month too. 6'3", 305. He's sort of a true nose tackle. Look at that. SC getting a nose tackle out of Utah. Is it Stevie T all over again?
6'3", 305 at as a junior in high school.
Yeah, 2026 guy.
I didn't look it up, but I'm gonna guess there's some relation
To
to
Feely?
Feely Moala.
Yeah.
And the pedigree there, you gotta love
Question
it.
for you about
Yes.
Feely.
Yes.
Feely Moala, very good player. Number 75, I think, on defensive line. Was he the one of the biggest unsung heroes on that 2008 defense?
Oh yes. Yeah. He was
Because he wasn't
he was essentially the Kevin Ellison of the defensive front. Like,
yeah.
I mean, in a different way though, because like that defensive front was just so loaded. Like it would be easy to, if USC had a Feely Moala available to them at any point over the last 10 years, he's instantly on every single defensive line, the best defensive lineman that USC has. That's my opinion. But I don't know. It's hard to tell sometimes because guys look good when guys are next to them. But he have a pretty decent stuck in the NFL for a little while there. So yeah, he definitely unsung, but definitely really solid player.
Yeah, I think he played for the Colts.
Yeah,
but
he was with the Colts for a while.
either way, 4-star linebacker Ty Jackson and 4-star defensive lineman Vilami Moala. Exactly what you want to see from SC's commitments. Ty Jackson for next year, Moala for 2026. We'll see if those hold through signing day. Last little news nugget before we start talking about SC and Michigan a little bit. Talk about the NFL really quick. Sam Darnold's brand new man. And Caleb Williams. That's another Trojan, Caleb Wilson.
Yes.
Caleb Williams, also a brand new man in a completely different sense. Although maybe the same man. Behind a atrocious offensive line for the Bears.
Yeah, Caleb, the stats that are coming out of the Sunday Night Football game about the pressures that Caleb faced are pretty astounding. That Bears offensive line is real not good. Although, I mean, I do want to give credit to the Texans defensive front. That is a good defense that they were going against, but it's going to be tough sledding for Caleb until they figure out that offensive line. I thought he looked pretty decent for what was going on in front of him, but he needs to stop throwing off his back foot so much, even though he can make those throws, but doesn't mean he should make those throws.
Yeah.
And
he was 36 pressures and 44 dropbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's absurd. And I saw another stat that was saying he was getting the ball out in like 2.5 seconds. So it's not like he was like, it's not like it was him holding the ball too long. It was the line being terrible. But I think it's very interesting seeing Caleb Williams and Sam Darnold in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season as perfect examples of why situation matters for a quarterback. You know, Sam Darnold goes to the Jets. The Jets are a dumpster fire offensively. Every quarterback that's gone in there has been put through the ringer, and dudes are now coming out of that ringer and finding jobs and being decent in the NFL once they're away from the Jets, like Geno Smith and and now Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
We look at like Caleb Williams, and it felt like a pretty good spot for him to land in terms of the skill position talent and the defense. For sure, that defense kept them in the game, but you still need to give your rookie quarterback some foundation upon which to stand, and that's I think what the Texans did really well last year with CJ Stroud, and gave him time to settle in and not be sort of ruined the way that Bryce Young is ruined. And I think my fear for Caleb right now is he really needs to keep his head on straight and not let these early struggles get to him, because this is how quarterbacks lose their swagger and then just,
You saw it with Matt Leinart, right? Like he had an injury that played a role too, but like he was thrown to the Lions.
Well, like we'll never find out if David Carr could have been an actually serviceable quarterback in the NFL, because he was sacked every other play with the Texans. Like there are guys who just go and never get their shot, and then there are guys like Patrick Mahomes who are naturally gifted and definitely top tier NFL quarterback prospects, but they go to the Chiefs with Andy Reid and it's a match made in heaven. And that does matter. So it is nice to see Sam Darnold out there doing so well with the Vikings, with a head coach, Kevin O'Connell, who is a very, very good offensive mind, who knows how to have successful quarterback play, seemingly regardless of the perception of that quarterback beforehand. So it's good. It's good to see Darnold, but this is another case for, I saw some people on Twitter talking about how like these last couple of weeks have been a case study for the Lincoln Riley offense, because you're seeing this with Miller Moss and every other quarterback that's played for Lincoln Riley. Some guys are just really good at setting up the quarterback for success, and Lincoln Riley is. And not all teams are set up to have the quarterback be successful. And
Hey, Kyler Murray looked pretty good. Perfect passer.
Well, and again, Kyler Murray is another really good example of when he's been in a system that he feels comfortable. Like, dude can make plays. Like, he's not a bad quarterback, but when you put him in a bad situation, like the Cardinals did over the last couple of years, he's gonna look like a bad quarterback. The question with him is ceiling, and it always has been. But like, dude can make plays. That's not really what's holding them back.
Yeah, to have Marvin Harrison out there is, he's absolutely a dog. And speaking of dogs, Alicia, we've got Jesse back here on the camera here on YouTube.
We got Jesse cam. We got to tilt the camera up a little bit, because maybe the tilt is a little bit too much. Go. But there's Miss Jessie.
There's a little better. Yeah. Little Jessie.
She's hanging out.
Yeah. She of course
doing that thing where she doesn't lay on her bed.
Yeah.
Unless we are not recording.
Yeah, and then she's there. Yeah. She of course is the what would you call it? The favorite, the fan favorite, but she's not the underdog, because Alicia, the underdog is Underdog Fantasy. Have you joined Underdog Fantasy? Because I've been in there and it's awesome. And it's football season. Right now is the perfect time to do it. It's going to be the longest football season ever. Goes in deep into next year. That means you'll get plenty of time and plenty of opportunities to join the more than 1 million fans that play Underdog Fantasy. Win up to 1,000 times your money by just choosing whether you think your favorite players will go higher or lower than their stat projections. Sam Darnold did really good this past week, right?
Time to go in on Sam Darnold.
Go all in on Sam Darnold next week. Log in to the Underdog Fantasy app. Use the promo code Reign of Troy, all one word, Reign of Troy, and look at what the line is. Pick if it's going to be higher or lower. Pick what the stat projection is. Pick if it's going to be higher or lower. His passing yards, and then make your pick there. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com and sign up with the promo code Reign of Troy. Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy promo code Reign of Troy, all one word, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and deposit offer. Must be 21 plus. 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned about your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpggambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And if you're in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-888-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Alicia, you know who's not an underdog?
USC.
The Trojans. USC
Shocker.
is not an underdog because the Trojans going into Ann Arbor on Saturday as 6-point favorites currently. According to Vegas Insider, the Trojans were a 10-point dog when the line opened up over the summer. But of course, now things have changed. Michigan is 2-1 after a big loss to Texas last week. They beat Arkansas State this past week, a little bit of a up and down game. They were up 28-3 at one point, but they won 28-18. The Red Wolves scored the final 14 points. Davis Warren threw 3 interceptions, but he's now being benched for Alex Orji. Lincoln Riley was quoted today after practice saying this is still one of the best defenses in the country. Make no mistake, this is still a very, very, very good football team. And he added that anyone who thinks otherwise is crazy, according to our friend Keely Orr. Alicia, your thoughts on the Trojans being favorites in Ann Arbor, 6-point favorites in Ann Arbor?
That swing is incredible.
Yeah.
And I think it has a lot to do with the performance of Michigan this year, and also a lot to do with the performance of USC's defense. I think there was still a lot of skepticism about USC going into this year, and the defense being one of the biggest issues, even bigger than the quarterback question. And USC comes out and the defense looks very good and the quarterback looks very good, and suddenly everyone is buying stock in the Trojans. So it's fascinating to see that flip. What I'm curious about from a USC perspective, and I think this is what Lincoln Riley is sort of getting at, because he needs to keep his messaging on point this week and over the last 2 weeks with the bye week, is USC went from being in an underdog position where they were going to try to go into the big house and get a big upset and have that chip on their shoulder from being doubted, and have all of the panels going into Saturday picking Michigan and USC getting to point to that and all that. They don't get to do that anymore. Now USC is going to be the one that's getting picked by a lot of people. Michigan gets that underdog beat. Michigan gets that chip on their shoulder. Michigan has the disrespect that they can lean on when it comes to hyping themselves up for this matchup. So for the first time, really, USC is faced with a very, very big game that people expect them to win. And it's not about proving doubters wrong now. It's about proving people right. And it's not always the easiest position to be in. This is why successful teams like Georgia and Alabama, I mean, the whole concept of rat poison that Nick Saban would talk about, that's why they sort of develop those mindsets. And that's why they're great, because they don't get caught up in all the talk and the expectation that they're just going to walk in and win. Like Lincoln Riley said, as bad as Michigan's offense is, and Michigan's offense is pretty darn not great.
Yeah.
That defense is very, very good.
Hot damn, that defense.
Yeah.
And you can't overlook that at all.
Yeah, we're going to preview the defense and the offense from Michigan way more in depth on Wednesday, but did want to give a quick spoiler to what we have in our preview. Michigan's offense is the numbers are horrendous, as they would say at the Podcast of Champions. 106th of the nation, with only 16% of their plays gaining 7+ yards. We're going to get way more into the weeds on the stats on Wednesday, but it's it's wild. Dead last in the Big Ten in turnovers. A lot of that comes down to Davis Warren, who won the starting job at quarterback. We didn't think about him winning the starting job. He wasn't even mentioned in our season predictions episode.
We were talking about Orgy.
We were talking about Orgy. We were talking about potentially Tuttle.
Yeah.
As being the guy, because all the research I did was about those two guys. No one ever mentioned Davis Warren. It's like, who's this dude? Well, he's no longer the dude because he's thrown 6 picks in 3 weeks.
Yeah, he was a feel-good story because he beat cancer and all of that, and it's like you want to root for him. But when it comes down to it, he came in and that offense just wasn't working. The throws he was making were just not it. And it honestly, the fact that Davis Warren won that job was a huge red flag about who the quarterback that USC will now face in Alex Orji. How did Alex Orji not win the job over this guy?
Well, I think it's interesting to talk about Alex Orji is that last year he was a package guy. He's a runner.
Someone
Someone
throw
who
a pass, I think.
he threw one pass, one career pass coming into the season. He now has 7. He's 3 for 6 for 15 yards. 2 of those 3 completions have gone for touchdowns.
Yeah.
58 yards on 10 carries on the ground. I think he is going to be a big threat and a big test on the ground with his legs. Perhaps the biggest test that SC will face maybe all year
From a running
quarterback standpoint. And, that will always conjure memories of a guy SC played January 4th, 2006. Also,
Heck,
Al Roberson,
Tavina Pritchard's
sure.
There've been
Jaden Daniels.
There've been a million running quarterbacks with limited arms that have hurt USC over the years.
Yeah,
hated facing dual threat quarterbacks. But that's
Bryson Barnes.
Yeah. That's the question for USC's defense. Is this is a different challenge, but one that will basically be about whether or not they can stay disciplined. And so I'm going to be very curious. We're going to talk a lot more about this on the coming episodes, but that's going to be the big thing. That there was a lot of talk though, and I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on this, because I don't know. We haven't talked about this yet. There was some criticism of Sharon Moore revealing this on Monday.
I think it was stupid. I don't get it. I like it from a we can talk perspective, from a media perspective. It's awesome. It's awesome. We can sit here and we can talk about Alex Orji being starter. We don't have to put a lot of time and effort into prepping any sort of preview in depth for Davis Warren. But the same could also be said for Lincoln Riley and Danton Lynn right now. Yes, SC had 2 weeks to prepare because of the bye week, and only one of those is going to be knowing for sure who the starting quarterback is. But they could have done it to where it was 0.
Yeah.
Like I as frustrating as it is when coaches don't say who the starting quarterback is until they break the huddle on the first play of the game, it has value. There's a reason that every coach does it. That's why it was kind of shocking that Lincoln Riley announced that Miller Moss was the starter for the LSU game like 3 weeks ahead of time, right?
I mean, like
this is even more shocking to me because we're in the middle of the season at this point. There's gamesmanship. It's the first Big Ten game. This is a game that for Michigan, now that, you just need to win the Big Ten to get in the playoff, they can say the Texas game doesn't matter, right? Like they can just say that we just need to focus on everything. Keeping this internally and going to Alex Orji and saying you're the starter, because Ryan Karchi tweeted, who's a Michigan alum, tweeted that he thought it was weird that Jerome Moore said this and put it out there. And then there was a reply from a Michigan fan that was like, yeah, but Alex Orji now has all the confidence all week knowing that he's the guy. That is a different thing. He could have been told this internally. Like if you're Sharon Moore, tell him internally. Bring him into the office. Tell him that you're going to be the starter. Don't go to the media and tell him this. That way everybody knows.
And like the counterpoint there is that they're trying to instill confidence in him and have it be like he's the quarterback and the team rally around him and all that kind of stuff. And I get that.
Yeah.
But like Utah State didn't. establish that Bryson Barnes was going to be the quarterback. Even though we all knew Bryson Barnes was going to be the quarterback, they sort of had Spencer Petras as like a, questionable.
Mhm.
And we're going to see, Quinn Ewers is questionable this week for ULM with Texas. There is zero chance that Quinn Ewers plays in that game, but they're going to call it questionable just for, gamesmanship. So I did think it was very strange that they would reveal this right away. But at the same time, like at a certain point, if you're Michigan, Davis Warren was so ineffective as a quarterback that continuing with him as your quarterback would have just felt silly.
Well, Walter in the chat says, "Did you see Warren play?" I think that plays into the idea that like it could have just been so obvious at that point.
Yeah,
and sure, I think it probably is, right? But I still think that coaches usually lie in this instance. So
yeah. So I mean, good on Sharon Moore for being being forthright.
Yeah, absolutely. He's 3-1 as Michigan head coach, of course. 2-1 this season, and then got that big win last year that we all remember over Penn State, in which he cried afterwards. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. The Trojans and the Wolverines meeting 12:30 p.m. on CBS. Alicia, it's on CBS at 12:30. How cool is that?
It's strange.
It's cool though, right? Like Brad Nessler's going to be on the call, but it's CBS.
The 12:30 game on CBS is supposed to be an SEC game.
Not anymore, baby. Not anymore.
I know they switched to like Big Ten. It was last year, a couple of years ago, but like CBS at noon is. I just think SEC. I just always assume SEC.
You gotta reprogram. This is like when I was a kid, all the AFC games were on NBC, and then CBS got the rights back in like 2002 or something like that. And then you had to reprogram your brain. Well, here you are, reprogramming your brain. And Alicia, the trivia question of the day is: do you remember the last time SC was on a 12:30 p.m. game on CBS?
It's the Home Depot SEC on CBS. A couple of top-ranked teams, the Trojans of USC against the Tigers of Auburn.
That was going to be my guess. Because I was trying to remember the last time USC played an SEC team in the regular season, and I remembered Arkansas, but that was a night game.
There was a night game that was Saturday Night Football with Mike Patrick.
Yeah, so I was going to guess Auburn.
Yeah, it is Auburn. The 2004 game was an SEC ESPN broadcast with Ron Franklin against Virginia Tech. That was like the SEC crew that still called that game, but that wasn't on. That was on ESPN. That was a night game in Landover, Maryland. But this one, CBS, just like the Auburn game in 2003. Of course, SC won that game 23-0, 23-0. But of course, not only is it just CBS, Alicia, Brad Nessler's on the call. How cool is this? Do you remember? Do you remember Brad Nessler calling an SC game?
I don't have a memory of broadcasters and their names the way that you do.
So right,
I do not.
Okay, hold on. How about this?
Ladder rolls, throws deep, got a man, touchdown! What a great catch! Dominic Bird flies high and pulls it in.
Starting to ring a bell, maybe?
That's a pretty standard call.
Now it's Ladder, might want it all. Going deep, left sideline, man's there, he's got him, Jarrett, touchdown! Second down, short 9, Leonard has time, lofts it to Smith. He caught it, touchdown!
Anything?
I mean, I know the era.
Okay, fine. How about this?
Your BCS national champions, the Trojans of USC.
I know for a fact that the last time SC played on CBS was the Auburn game. Sorry, CBS, the 12:30 slot.
Yes.
There was another game on CBS that we're not going to mention because some bowl doesn't get mentioned, and that was on CBS. But that was a bowl game. Doesn't really count. Like, come on, we're not counting it. Regular season game, 2003 Auburn game. I don't know if this is the last Brad Nessler game. the first Brad Nessler game since the Oklahoma game. SC has played a ton of ABC games. A lot of those ABC games since the 2005 Orange Bowl have been, Fowler, Musburger, a little bit of Keith Jackson in 2005. There's a possibility that Nessler called one of those. I can't confirm that, but for sure, it's his first game at CBS calling the Trojans. Any other Michigan memories? What do you got? Do you remember a time when SC played Michigan?
I mean,
Anything?
the big games against Michigan at the Rose Bowl. Those were, I mean, I remember just like I have a distinct memory of laying in bed the night before the 2007 Rose Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And just like praying, like, please, like I was so.
Is that what Catholic girl Alicia was like back in the day?
Alicia would pray about football. I just had.
You really were a Notre Dame person.
I was very invested in USC winning that game, and I was very worried about them playing Michigan and disappointing me. And it turned out to be A-okay.
Rose Bowl, baby.
Yeah, and then of course the 2004 game.
Yeah.
Iconic moments from that game. The that's the Leinart touchdown catch, right? In that game?
It's the touchdown catch to Leinart from Mike Williams.
Yeah.
SC won that game 28-7, 28-14, 28-7.
I don't remember.
John Navarre sacked 7 times. SC got after Chad Henne a ton in the 2007 game. 2007 game is the one that we always talk about the coaching adjustments at halftime. I pulled up the LA Times story from the 2007 Rose Bowl just to, like, what was Gary Klein saying back in the day? This is from Gary Klein's story. During one stretch, the Trojans passed or had John David Booty run quarterback sneaks on 29 consecutive plays. 29. I wasn't going to take the ball out of John David and Steve's and Dwayne's hands, offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin said. I called Booty on the phone and told him, we're going to throw the ball every single time. Jarrett got the same message. I was like, yeah, that's what I wanted to hear, said Jarrett, who finished with 11 catches and 205 yards and 2 touchdowns. Said Smith, who had 7 catches for 108. We knew we could explode if the ball was in the air. Yes. SC did that. They threw on literally every single play in the second half.
And it's funny because it's like the reverse Michigan. Because last year there were there was Michigan games where it's like, are they going to throw a pass for the rest of the game? They were just run. There was like a sequence where it was like 20 runs in a row or something like that. I might be exaggerating, but yeah, it's sort of fitting.
We have audio from the halftime speech.
I choose not to run.
Yeah.
And it worked beautifully. I mean, it was one of those funny moments where football fans are either screaming, run the damn ball, or stop running the damn ball.
Mm-hmm.
And we're never satisfied by the run pass ratios that any team ever has.
Yeah.
But
there's lone exceptions, and this is one of those.
The lone exception of everybody watched USC come out in that second half and was like, I am perfectly fine with USC never running the ball ever again in this game.
Yeah, that the first half,
and that's
not great.
I mean, to bring it back to this weekend's the matchup, I don't think USC should go out and never run the ball, but they will have a hard time running the ball against this defensive front. So it could be another game where USC has to adjust on the fly and decide to go with what's working, and could be interesting to see if we see another one of these.
Yeah, we'll see what the game plan is for the Trojans on offense. We'll talk about that more on Wednesday. I think it's, by the way, a comment from Lincoln's Pfizer in the chat. One of my favorite USC drives ever. SC up 25-11. Everyone thought they were going to bleed out the clock, but 4 consecutive completions later leads to a Steve Smith touchdown. That is, honest to God, my favorite drive in SC history too. 4 plays. All of them were like 20-yard pass plays.
Yeah.
One of them was to Fred Davis. There's another one to Dwayne Jarrett. Like, it was just chunk. and just slashing through. I don't think SC should necessarily follow the same script.
But it should be something that is kept in back of mind. Like,
sure,
obviously, if you're USC, you want to be able to run the ball in this game. Texas was able to run the ball in that game. We're going to talk more about this, but so not going to get super into it. But like, you want to be able to have a balanced offense. But I think one of the things that I want USC and Lincoln Riley to be okay with is throw the game plan out the window and find what works if you need to at some point. So, that's what Kiffin did in this game.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I like about Lane Kiffin, Lincoln Riley, wrong L, is that he tends to do what you don't expect him to do. And maybe this is just, bias here, recency bias, confirmation bias, whatever. But I feel like it feels different than when SC was sort of in the gumbo offense under Clay Helton, when it was like, I bet you don't think we're going to do this, right? It doesn't feel like the same thing. Like, look at the last drive going into the half against LSU, right? SC runs the ball there before the field goal to set up the field goal and gets a big, huge run. Look back at the Caleb Williams Red River shootout against Texas where he wins it at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
They win it on a run in a 2-minute drill or like a 1-minute drill, right? Like they're coming down in the last seconds. They run the ball unexpectedly. And I think that like the ability to sort of keep teams off balance and maybe seeming like you're going to be one-dimensional and then change it at the last second.
What it is,
I think like has a lot of impact.
What it is Riley likes to react to what the defense.
Yeah, and if you're going to get a light box, run.
Yeah, and that I think was, I remember screaming and just wanting to rip my hair out because Graham Harrell, for some reason, decided that even when given a light box, they would just never run the ball because they decided they couldn't run the ball. Yeah. Lincoln Riley always seems to think we can run the ball. And I think that could get him into trouble at times. But he does do a good job of like you said, if teams are saying, if teams invite Lincoln Riley to run, Lincoln Riley is happy to run. And if teams invite Lincoln Riley to pass, which I don't think they try to do, but if they want to go stack the box, that opens up everything else for Riley. I think it's part of the reason why Riley's offense is so successful is because he is flexible. Yeah. There's like a balance. There's a flexibility to his balance. It's not 50-50 for the sake of being 50-50.
Right.
It's that true balance of like doing what
there's balance of expectation, right?
Yes. Well, and it's also, it goes back to the too small blanket concept.
Sure.
We always talk about that defending is you're trying to sleep and your blanket is too small. You can either cover your head or you can cover your toes, and you're going to have to leave one exposed. And Riley does a very good job of not deciding I'm going to attack the toes no matter what. Right. I'm only going to attack the toes if they're exposed.
Yeah. Of course, it's easy to say this now when SC, comes off the LSU game where they win.
Well, this all requires execution. That's the thing. Is
100%, because, back at the Utah game and the Washington game last year, we were saying that SC had,
because I choose not to run,
gave us reasons to hit that button a little too much. So there's balance at play. There's an execution, because
if your offensive lineman can't block the defensive lineman in front of them, it doesn't matter how many men are in the box or not.
Yeah.
If you're losing the battle at the line of scrimmage, and defensive linemen are making tackles, you're screwed no matter what. So
and history's written by the winners, right? Yes. There's a reason that all the maps point northward, right? It's because maps were first made in the northern hemisphere.
Is that?
I read this on Our Geography. Our Geography is incredible. You should go read it. But there was this thing about why is Antarctica on the bottom of the earth? And the answer is it's literally coincidence, because it's always moved, like the Pangea, like it's
Right.
moved and all this stuff, but like it has nothing to do with like being at the bottom of the earth. But also, like the idea of the bottom of the earth is such a human construct that means nothing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like we always think that top and bottom, north and south, but like in space, that does not matter.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. So like
those are orientations that are relative to something, like
Yes.
that are in reference to
Right.
something, and that something is the
yeah. Some people are like, well, it should be north because of the North Star, but
yeah, but the North Star is the North Star because
yeah, the North Star could be the South Star.
you could call it something else.
Could be the South Star.
Yeah.
Like you could just like see the North Star and then look the other way and say that's the South. You know, I don't know. All right, we'll shut up on this weird tangent. Let's get to the mailbag, shall we?
You've got mail.
All right, mailbag. Let's start with the messages that we got here in chat so far today. Angry Trojan, Josh and Buckeye Country. Is it me or am I crazy that game day isn't going to Michigan for the SC game?
So game day is going to Oklahoma
Tennessee,
for Tennessee, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Which I understand because I don't. Part of this is because I'm pretty sure game day went to Michigan for Michigan, Texas, and they don't tend to go to the same place twice in a season, let alone twice so soon after. So by going to Texas, Michigan, it basically made USC Michigan always going to be somewhere that wasn't Ann Arbor.
Mhm.
If this game was at the Coliseum, I think game day would be there. But it's the logistics of not wanting to go back to Ann Arbor. They like to spread things around. And frankly, I don't know that they're going to have another chance. Well, Red River, but Red River's not in Norman, so you know.
Yeah, it's in Dallas. Yeah. I think Tennessee also, like right now, is a very interesting story.
Yeah.
Like I know that like obviously all of the SC fans are hyper focused on SC right now, but like in the national perspective, Tennessee is like very fascinating. With Nico at quarterback and like what are they able to do? They're just murdering freaking teams, murdering them.
They Tennessee and Ole Miss, and again, it's hard to tell because they haven't really played anybody.
I mean, Tennessee murdered NC State. Though.
Yeah, and NC State is supposed to be NC State. I don't know what's the name of NC State this year.
College
They've
football
won
25
national
loves
titles in college football 25.
Loves NC State.
In reality, they've looked pretty shaky all season.
Yeah.
But no, Tennessee. The crazy thing about what Tennessee is doing and Ole Miss so far is their offenses are just as powerful as we thought they'd be. Their defenses are showing up and doing extremely well. And yeah, I think
neither of those two teams have allowed a touchdown.
I certainly think there is the argument for going to a Tennessee-Oklahoma game.
It's Oklahoma's first SEC game as well.
Enthusiasm for that game from both fan bases is high. Where I think USC Michigan at this point, like Michigan fans feel tight. Like they feel like
there's also
they're bracing for impact. And that's not the environment that game day wants to be at, especially like Michigan having lost so badly a couple weeks ago. Like, I just don't think they wanted to risk having a dud of a game day.
I think the other thing too is like there's going to be other opportunities to see SC in Michigan this year. Obviously, Michigan, Ohio State is always going to be a potential game day game. SC has a bunch of great home games that are very valuable for game day.
Yes.
Penn State, Nebraska, Notre Dame, like any of those could be game day games, right? Like any of them could be. And you don't need to get the SC Michigan game because you're going to more than likely have a chance to get SC or Michigan or Michigan later on in the year as well.
Kenny in the chat says, I think Nebraska is our one shot at game day. If I had to pick a game that USC gets game day, it's that Nebraska game. The Dylan Raiola of it all, the USC of it all at that point. If both of those teams take care of business the way that they need to, this could be really, really fun.
Yeah, and I know October 12th is the other one that has all the big ranked games. SC Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Ole Miss, LSU. What else is Red River is that day, right? Stanford, Notre Dame. But I think when you put everything together like that, whoever gets game day that day, I think is going to be dependent on what happens the week or two before.
So
If Oregon and Ohio State are undefeated, game day is
That's
going to be
game
in
day.
Eugene.
Yes.
If those teams have a loss or two, then they're going to be at the Coliseum for Penn State. SC and Penn State. Like there's flexibility here. We're going to see where the teams actually go. I mean, how everything sort of moves.
Looking at the schedules, I think it's extremely likely that Ohio State and Oregon will both be undefeated when they come to that game. But if they aren't, if Ohio State slips up against Iowa or something like that, or Oregon has another shaky game that they lose, and USC and Penn State are both undefeated and going into that game looking like USC has beat Michigan and Penn State has continued to look good, like there will be an argument. Yeah, I don't know.
I will just say I will be very annoyed if game day. I say this as if I wake up early enough to watch game day, which I don't. But I will be very annoyed if that's the week where game day is like, actually, we're gonna go to hold on, what's the big game?
That thing where they're like, we want to go
Idaho, Montana State.
Yeah, we want to go to Montana State.
Yeah,
because
Idaho, Montana State that day is going to be a great FCS game.
Yeah,
you don't go there when there's no other game on the docket.
USC, unless USC falls off a cliff, which I don't know, who knows. USC should have a game day game this year.
Yeah, we'll see.
When it'll be is the question.
We will see. All right. Ron Murray says, where does SC stand in the Big Ten power rankings, and which team is worse, Purdue or UCLA? Our friends over at the Podcast of Champions, Ryan and Dave, had SC number 1 last week.
Here's my argument. It power rankings should be reactive, in my opinion. If you're doing a power ranking as opposed to a ranking, like the AP is not a power ranking. The AP poll, the coaches poll, are them trying to decide the best teams in the country that with a combination of team strength and wins or losses or all that kind of stuff. Power ranking should react to results that have already happened. Mm-hmm. And if we're doing that, I think there is a very strong case for USC being number 1, because I think USC has the most impressive victory of all of the Pac-12 of the Big Ten teams so far. USC's
Penn State's win over West Virginia hasn't aged well.
No, and USC's win over LSU hasn't aged super well either. But LSU is still a ranked team. LSU is still a team that we can expect to continue to be ranked. Ohio State hasn't played anybody. Oregon has struggled with the teams that they've played. Iowa's already lost. Nebraska has the win over Colorado, but that's not a particularly impressive win considering what Colorado is. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to have USC be number 1 in a power ranking.
Yeah,
that is basing it off of
vibes.
Like, who have you beaten? Do you have an impressive win yet? Because that's the thing, is like, I wouldn't rank USC over Ohio State in a real ranking. I'm not stupid. Well, but Ohio State hasn't played anybody yet. So until they get a good win on their schedule in a power ranking, they could be behind USC because there's just a better win on the slate for USC.
Yeah, Josh Pate just had this conversation of like ratings versus rankings.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly which one he said was which. If I remember right, I think I might have disagreed.
Ratings, in my opinion, I didn't watch this, but ratings to me are like what College Football 25 does. Your team is rated an 83.
Sure.
And USC is rated an 83 and Ohio State is rated an 85. Therefore, Ohio State is
ratings, I think of metrics though.
I mean, I suppose so, but
I see what you're saying. But his argument was that one of them is a ranking of sorts based on if they were going to play tomorrow, which team play tomorrow on a neutral field
would win.
Which team would you pick? Yeah. And which is, to me, that's the AP poll.
Yeah.
And then there's power rankings, which is, includes vibes. It includes who's hot,
Momentum,
who's not,
yeah.
momentum, resume, like all those kind of things kind of play into it. Like prime example, I think you could make the argument that the AP poll number 1 should be Georgia and the SEC power rankings should be Texas.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
that's a very good way to put it.
Yeah. So, all right. Next question. Oh, and which is worse, Purdue or UCLA? I haven't. What did? Oh, yeah. Purdue lost to Notre Dame 66-7.
Purdue got pantsed by Notre Dame, and UCLA.
How much
got
of that was
pantsed by
about Purdue?
Indiana.
How much of that was like Notre Dame finally had the balls bounce in their way, their favor?
I mean, Notre Dame did have things.
Don't
Notre
cut
Dame,
that, Jake, please.
Notre Dame had 3 touchdowns in like 90 seconds because there was like a interception and something. You know, things got out of control with that game. Both of those teams are pretty.
Purdue had 162 yards of total offense, 6 first downs. Yikes!
Yeah.
Okay. I put UCLA worse only because UCLA has looked like ass against teams that they shouldn't look like ass against. Purdue getting absolutely jiggle-bagged by Notre Dame, sort of expected, but like expected in like what a Notre Dame dominant win is, which is like a 31-10 win. You know what I mean? Like that's what I sort of expected Notre Dame to do in West Lafayette, not beat them 66-7.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. I think you've hit the nail on the head here. If UCLA had started their season against an FCS team like Indiana State, like Purdue did,
yeah, they would have won.
Would this UCLA team have beaten them 49-0? I don't think so. Not that I think they would have lost to them, but I just don't think that you would have had such a dominant win that Purdue did.
Sure.
So Purdue's not good, but UCLA, and I'm not even gonna like UCLA. The circumstances that UCLA finds itself in are impossible to succeed under. This is going to be a really long and a really rough season for UCLA, and I feel bad for them. If ever LSU needed a really solid like tune-up, like Kenny, let's just get to this question. Kenny asked, did Saturday's LSU and Utah State games change or inform your opinions on 2024 USC? From a USC perspective, it informed my opinion defensively that the team is tackling that wasn't an illusion, that they were positioned correctly. That wasn't an illusion. Doesn't mean that this defense is going to shut out more teams, but they are at least solid. Where with LSU, I was texting people like, it's possible USC broke LSU. Like LSU is not lacking talent. LSU to me looks like they are lacking. They are like USC in 2023, where you could tell the point at which the team ceased to buy in. You can watch a team and see where the lack of buy-in is. And I think LSU has lost, Brian Kelly has lost the buy-in of his team, and his team is therefore like not playing with a swagger or confidence. That defense looks like they've completely, like, I thought they tackled pretty decently against USC, and then they go out in that game and literally look like tackling on par with USC's tackling last season. That to me continues to be a confidence issue with a defensive coordinator. There's a good defensive coordinator, so it's something deeper than just like the scheme or anything like that. All of this is to say, like, if LSU struggles with UCLA, then we hit the panic button and say, "Woo, yeah, no, that win meant nothing."
Right.
But I think that UCLA is the perfect opponent for LSU to get their groove back against, because,
I look at this a couple of different ways. One, I think you can rationalize LSU's struggles the last 2 weeks. Short week against Nicholls State, an FCS team that they're not going to feel excited about. After a loss, like, that could have been a punching bag, but also it could have been a game where they were gassed from the week before, whatever. Maybe. I think you can say that. South Carolina is a good team. Like, they're a good team. They're a tough team to play. I don't think there's any shame in beating South Carolina by 3 on the road, especially in Columbia. But yeah, they didn't look
They
flawless
didn't pass the
in
eye
that game.
test in that game. That was the problem.
But I think when we compare it to what SC is because of LSU and because Utah State held tough with Utah, even though Cam Rising didn't play, I think it goes back to look at SC's defense. First of all, how we feel about SC, I think has nothing to do with the offense. I think the SC offense has looked fine the first 2 games. They could be better, sure, but like there's no panic button to press about the SC offense, but there also isn't like this is the greatest SC offense you've ever seen kind of thing, right? Like the offense is good. They're just good.
Yeah.
Where all the hype train is coming about SC's performance thus far is on defense. And I think that was LSU's vaunted offensive line maybe a little bit oversold? Maybe. But I don't think it matters because we talked about this after the LSU game. What were the big takeaways? And for me, it didn't matter if SC won that game or lost. They passed the eye test defensively because of all the things that they were able to do that is regardless of opponent, which is wrapping up and tackling, which is not getting beat down over the top for big plays, not giving up chunk plays.
Holding their own in the trenches.
Yeah, against Utah State, the backups could have come in and they could have given up 3 touchdowns, and that would have been not a big surprise because that's what happens with backups. But it didn't happen. Like they were tackling strongly.
The backups played exactly as well as the starters, and that is the sign of a well-coached team.
Yes, I agree.
Or well-coached unit.
Yeah, and I think you can say that. Yeah, Utah State might not be great, and I don't think there's a lot of stuff to take away from the Utah State game in that sense. But again, SC passed the eye test of what that should look like. It wasn't that SC beating Ohio State wasn't just a talent gap.
It feels like, going into Michigan, it's a good example. I think that what USC did to Utah State, there was certainly a talent gap, but what USC did in the way that they did it was not just dependent on the talent gap, which is basically how USC has operated the last 10 years. Going into Michigan, the talent gap disappears, and particularly the defensive line. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the defensive line in the full preview, but if USC can't run or loses the battle in the trenches, let's say, if USC loses the battle in the trenches, it will simply be because physically Michigan had an advantage over USC. Not because USC
will be, but could be.
No, yeah, this is hypothetical.
Yeah.
Not because USC schematically wasn't set up to succeed, not because USC had guys who didn't know what they were supposed to do, not because USC had guys who didn't tackle or this, that, or the other thing. My opinion going into this game is that there is a chance that Michigan simply has a physical advantage over USC. Right. And if that's the case, obviously I don't want USC to lose, but if USC loses for that reason, it's a lot easier for me to stomach because at a certain point, USC has fallen behind in the trenches with the physicality that they're able to bring, with the size that they're able to bring. And that's something that needs to be worked on with the program. But like, I can live with a well-drilled team that loses a physical battle because they're going up against guys who are going to be playing on Sundays, versus a team that gets beat physically and mentally. Yeah.
And that's where SC is absolutely passed the eye test. Like we said, it wasn't just a talent gap advantage like what you expect against the inferior teams. And the other thing about the SEC, like, not to go on a little tangent here, but we talked about this. I think we talked about it last week that there's 6 of the top 7 teams in the country in the AP poll are in the SEC. The interesting thing is when you look at their schedules, Georgia's the only team that like has to play all those teams. Georgia gets a very difficult schedule because they got to go through and pulling up their schedule right now. Georgia has to play at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, and home against Tennessee. I'm just putting it out here. There's no way that Georgia goes undefeated. If
Georgia goes undefeated,
if Georgia goes undefeated, this is going to be the most proven season in the history of
if Georgia goes undefeated, hand them the national title because no one's touching them.
But you look at everybody else's schedule is not like that.
They all play only one or two of the rest of those 7.
And it's mostly just one.
Yeah.
Ole Miss's schedule is cake. They get Oklahoma, but I don't think Oklahoma's that great. They get LSU. I don't think LSU's that great. But the only top 10 team they play is Georgia. And I think that we were talking about this, like the SEC, I think, has a situation where the schedules as they are built, I think will breed a lot of 11-1, 10-2 teams, which I think is going to end up filling the playoff because of that.
But
I'm not going to sit here and say that this was like some pointed effort by the SEC. Maybe it was, because do you expect that Ole Miss and Missouri are going to be two of those teams that need a schedule catered to? But I think the reality is that when we have a conference that is so big, there are naturally going to be a lot of teams that don't play the really big, tough teams because you get a lot of misses, right? But I think to go back to the SEC is like one thing the SEC, and you and I were talking about this when we were having lunch today, the SEC has always done this thing where they haven't necessarily eaten themselves because it ends up being a conference of chalk in a lot of ways, unlike the Pac-12, because the Pac-12 never had an undefeated champion until last season, the very last season of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Washington was the first team to ever go 9-0. And before then, everybody went at 8-1, 7-2, because you were going to lose in Corvallis.
It was always USC lost to Oregon State.
Oregon always lost in the desert.
Oregon lost to Arizona.
Yeah, like
Washington lost to Washington State. Cal or Stanford got somebody.
Right. And the SEC, that doesn't necessarily happen because I think there is a tier of SEC teams that are good. South Carolina, Kentucky, Oklahoma, LSU. Maybe you put Auburn in there, probably not. Those are good good top 40 teams. None of those are going to beat any of the teams in the top 10.
This is the interesting thing though, because
they're all going to be chalk losses.
USC is now in the Big Ten, and if you look at the Big Ten, it's set up very similar.
It is, yeah. Not as drastically.
No, and Iowa losing to Iowa State really screwed them because Iowa was set up to be 2 or 1 loss. Penn State is set up to be 2 loss. Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, like all of them. USC is the Georgia in this, and it's not even that much of a Georgia thing because
SC still misses Oregon State and Oregon
State and Oregon
and Ohio State.
Yeah, so a lot of Big Ten teams are set up to be 1 or 2 losses and have complicated tiebreakers decide who's going to go to the conference title game. But I think this is, if we're talking about the college football playoff committee, I think we could look back at this September as being very critical for those Big Ten teams because remember, the Big Ten and every other conference had a really good record against the SEC in out of conference. And we might maybe see the committee pay attention to that in a way that AP voters are too focused on, on just the move them up, move them down, depending on what happened the last weekend,
right.
Where the committee will start from scratch. And I think that there's a situation where, depending on how all of these teams do, that the Big Ten, what I mean to say is, I don't think the Big Ten is going to have a dearth of teams in the playoff. I think right now what we're looking at is the ACC and the Big 12 at best are going to get 1 bid. And right now the SEC in the Big Ten is going to split the remaining 8.
Kenny in the chat says that I think the SEC and Big Ten get all but 3 of the playoff spots. As it stands now, it looks like that.
Yeah.
This could end up being like the FCS playoffs, where every conference gets their auto bid. The Patriot League gets 1, and this conference gets 1, and this conference gets 1. And everybody else is from the Big Sky or the Missouri Valley, where it's the Dakotas and the Montanas and all those schools, because in a way, like we talked about in the season predictions episode, there's a world in which the records won't matter, in the sense of, like, if you're just one of the best Big Ten teams and one of the best SEC teams, you're probably going to be 10-2 by default. And those 2 losses that you have are going to be merit losses. Now, where the BS could come into play is,
what is a merit loss?
When the mid-tier that we talked about, like, is going to be all the chalk losses, South Carolina, Kentucky, LSU, Oklahoma, like those teams that are probably going to end up going 8-4 because they're just not as good as the teams that are in the top 10, and they're just going to be all the chalk losses. There's a world in which all of those teams rank in the top 20 still.
Yeah,
and I get it. Like, if you're playing a top 10 team and you lose by a touchdown, why should you go down? At the same time, like, some of this can be circle jerky, and this is why a lot of people don't like the SEC being like this. But the Big Ten's going to be like this too. Like, both of those conferences are going to have these are going to be like
so
this.
It's sort of even footing from a USC perspective, at least.
Yeah, well, SC's not in the Pac-12, so they don't have to worry about that.
USC's
that
not.
part.
Yeah, USC doesn't have to worry about that anymore. But I don't know. I think the committee has generally done a decent job of seeing through some of that. So, and also it's September 16th. We have sat many years on September 16th and thought, everybody looks so good and they're not going to lose any. And then random stuff happens.
Yeah.
We can never know.
It could be a 2007.
It might look chalky until all of a sudden it doesn't. And we don't know when that's going to, just something random.
Yeah. Lincoln's advisor in the chat says Josh Pate did a segment about how poor officiating was nationwide in his Kentucky post-game. Kirby Smart made a comment about how all the teams seem to be getting penalized more in general. Any thoughts on that? Do you have thoughts on it? Because I haven't necessarily noticed any
what I've
drastically
noticed?
Different thing, but I have a thought out of my ass that just might just be meaningless. But
you know what I have noticed?
What?
USC hasn't had a ton of penalties.
No.
Relative to what we've seen for USC. And I think that a lot of this is just like recency bias or like what happened in front of you.
Yes.
But I am willing to bet that USC and the rest of the Pac-12 schools are going to see probably going to end up having their best penalty numbers in a long time, simply by virtue of not being refereed by Pac-12 refs anymore.
So I'm going through CFB stats. I'm just toggling between 2020 and 2024. In the SEC, just looking at just SEC teams, just because those all have the same refs, right? The worst team so far this year in penalties per game is LSU and South Carolina. They're averaging 8.7 per game. In 2020, the worst penalized team was Mississippi State at 6.5. That's a big gap, it feels like. And then when you look on the other side, in 2020 there were 7 teams averaging under 6 penalties a game, and so far this season there's 3 in the SEC. 7 versus 3. I think that there could be the numbers just really quickly look like there are more penalties. I wonder, and this is my harebrained, pulled out of my ass theory, I have always thought the reason that people don't like the Pac-12 refs is because the Pac-12 refs call the game as the rules are set. Not necessarily that they call penalties that shouldn't be penalties. It's that they call penalties in a more strict fashion.
Yeah.
And other conferences are more lenient. And I think there's a world in which a couple factors could be at play here. Other conferences are getting more strict, but also the Pac-12 refs had to go somewhere too, right? Like, and they could just be infiltrating other conferences, and suddenly they have a stricter view of all the stuff too.
I
But-
just took a quick look through the last 6 or 7 years of penalties per game for the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. And the Big Ten, the range from number 1 to number 14 or whatever it is, was usually somewhere between 3 and 7. So 3 penalties per game for the best and 7 per game for the worst, give or take.
Yeah.
Looking through the Pac-12 penalties per game, it's like 4 and 9 or 4 and 8. So like again, the Pac-12 teams don't feel like the penalties are adding up, although Washington is having some penalty problems, but that's the whole thing.
Yeah. I just think that other conferences are starting to be more stricter.
Mhm.
And I wonder if that's because of an NCAA initiatives of like, this year we're gonna make pass interference a point of priority.
Yeah.
And it's like the Pac-12 was like, yeah, we were already doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is just harebrained theory. Don't put anything in it. Like, just me talking out of my ass.
It's also a very small sample size.
All right. That's going to be it. We'll be back Wednesday with our USC Michigan preview in earnest, in which we give you our predictions, play over under, run through the Michigan players to watch, all of that stuff. So join us back here Wednesday, 5 p.m. live on YouTube. We'll post it up on audio channels after that, of course, like we always do. So until then, we will see ya.
See ya.
See ya.